The U.S. is back on the offensive today in Iraq. The Pentagon confirming this morning that two F-18 jets dropped 500-pound laser-guided bombs on the terrorist group ISIS. The strikes are meant to stop the Sunni extremists from taking over a city in northern Iraq. The Pentagon saying that these are the first of what is expected to be a series of American attacks. President Obama authorizing those airstrikes yesterday, but saying there will be no U.S. boots on the ground. Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Pleffler in New York. President Obama also authorizing some much-needed emergency aid to be delivered. He said the U.S. is acting to protect American personnel and prevent a humanitarian crisis in Iraq. Iraqi soldiers passing out the food and the water to members of an ancient religious sect. About 50,000 of them, half children, are trapped in the mountains of northern Iraq. They fled their homes after ISIS issued an ultimatum: convert to Islam, pay a religious tax, or face death. ABC's Karen Travers has more from Washington on the developing story. Karen?
Good afternoon, Dan. President Obama said last night that if ISIS extremists threatened Americans, the U.S. would take action. And this morning, that is exactly what the military did with those targeted airstrikes. President Obama now becomes the fourth consecutive U.S. president to order military action in Iraq.
At approximately 6:45 Eastern Time, the U.S. military struck ISIS targets in northern Iraq. Two F-18 aircraft dropped 500-pound laser-guided bombs on a mobile artillery piece near Erbil. The Pentagon says that ISIS was using this artillery to shell Kurdish forces near where U.S. personnel are located. It's this type of targeted strike that President Obama last night vowed to take if necessary.
We intend to stay vigilant and take action if these terrorist forces threaten our personnel or facilities anywhere in Iraq.
A dire humanitarian crisis is developing in northern Iraq. Thousands of families have fled to the top of a mountain to escape the threat of ISIS militants below. Now they're trapped in a blistering heat. No water, no food. People are dying. Last night, the U.S. launched a challenging and dangerous aid mission. 3 U.S. Air Force cargo jets, escorted by F-18 fighter jets, dropped critical supplies, 5,300 gallons of water, and 8,000 meals ready to eat.
We can act carefully and responsibly to prevent a potential act of genocide. That's what we're doing on that mountain.
President Obama came into the White House with a pledge to end the U.S. involvement in the war in Iraq, and he did in 2011. Last night, he made the American people another promise.
I will not allow the United States to be dragged into fighting another war in Iraq.
President Obama also said he understands Americans' concerns about military action in Iraq, even targeted strikes like the ones this morning. But he also said that American combat troops will not be returning to battle there. Dan?
All right, ABC's Karen Travers for us in Washington. Karen, thank you for that. I want to bring in ABC's chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, standing by. John, the president authorizing the strikes yesterday, the first one coming this morning, but apparently the president is not going to be approving every strike directly. Is that correct?
That's right. The way it's been described to me is when the president made that authorization last night, which of course was before any military strikes happened, only the humanitarian mission had happened at that point, he was giving the military a green light to go after ISIS if it makes any move towards Mosul, any move towards Erbil or any move towards Baghdad, and also if it would be necessary to go after those that have that area under that mountaintop under siege. So the strike that we saw today, which was of an artillery piece outside of Erbil, that actual action was not individually approved by the president. It was the military had the green light to do it. The reason why they did it is because that piece of artillery was firing on Kurdish Peshmerga forces that were defending the city of Erbil, and if they had overtaken that position, they would have had a straight pathway right into the city. So the president didn't specifically approve that strike, but he certainly approved the overall action here.
And as you pointed out, those humanitarian aid drops that are taking place as well. Talk to me a little bit, John, about the direness, the emergency tone almost that the White House is taking for those ethnic Yazidis and Christians in Iraq.
Well, it's quite a dramatic situation, and it's a situation that has happened very quickly over the last several days. You have a series of Christian towns in northern Iraq that have been essentially overrun by ISIS. The Christians in those towns have been told that they will either face execution or they must leave and must convert to Islam. And there's even been evidence that when a conversion has happened, it's been followed by a beheading. So really, absolutely gruesome situation. Then you have the Yazidi minority group that has been stuck on this mountaintop because they have fled their homes, they have fled their area because they've been just forced out by ISIS, and they are on this mountaintop, surrounded, unable to get down, without food, without water. It's a desert situation, extremely hot, and already many had been believed to be dying. The exact number we don't know that are up there, but estimates as high as 40,000. So this was seen as an absolute dire emergency, an emerging catastrophe that needed to be dealt with immediately, which is why you saw very quick action yesterday by the U.S. military.
And as far as Americans in that region there, ISIS, I know, advancing towards the city of Erbil that you pointed out there. Yeah. Is there any plans or any discussions at this point to get Americans out of that area?
No, we are told there are no evacuation plans right now. It's fascinating because you have a consulate, you have a U.S. consulate in that city. You know, Erbil is the capital of Kurdistan and was seen as by far the most stable and prosperous part of Iraq, one that's been largely free of the ethnic violence that we have seen throughout the rest of the country. Kurdistan has been seen as a beacon of stability, so much so that when you saw ISIS doing its advance over the last couple of months, back in June, the administration ordered a partial evacuation of our Baghdad embassy, just a drawdown of the number of people in Baghdad. And many of those diplomats, U.S. diplomats that were stationed at the Baghdad embassy, were actually sent to Erbil because it was seen as a much safer place to work. Now you have a situation where they are there, and the administration won't give out the exact numbers, but I'm sure it's more than 100 diplomats working out of that consulate, that they could be directly threatened by this action of ISIS. ISIS actually going into what had been considered the safest and most stable part of Iraq.
John, if you can describe a little bit about just how cautious, how measured the president was in his word choice in making those announcements yesterday.
Well, first, the larger context is this is a president who is deeply reluctant to use U.S. military force. He's done it in the past, certainly. You've seen it with the drone operations that he has taken in Pakistan and in Yemen. You saw it in the coalition efforts to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya. But he has been extremely reluctant to use U.S. military force. Likes to use it only in coalition with an international mandate with other countries. This was a case where the U.S. was forced to act alone, and it was a decision the president was highly reluctant to make. And in announcing that decision, he wanted to be crystal clear that this was a limited military operation, specifically targeted to relieve a specific humanitarian crisis on one hand, and to protect U.S. military and diplomatic personnel on the other hand. He made it clear there will be no boots on the ground. This is not part of a larger mission. He's not trying to defeat ISIS with this. It is narrowly defined and something that will not, he promised, be turned into a mission creep, into a greater U.S. military operation in Iraq.
Lastly, John, I want to ask you about this. Measure the confidence level by the White House for the Iraqi government in handling this situation.
Well, the White House, the administration's been had almost no confidence in the Iraqi government going into this. The government of Maliki has really been seen as the problem here, creating the conditions where ISIS was able to amass so much power and move so quickly, because he's lost confidence of all but his own ethnic sect. I mean, all but his own, Shia sect. But now you have a situation where you had elections in the spring in Iraq, and they still haven't formed the coalition government coming out of those elections, but they're getting close to doing that. So there is more confidence now than there was a month ago, certainly, in the emerging Iraqi government. There seems to be a consensus in Iraq, a political consensus, that Nouri al-Maliki is not the right prime minister for Iraq, and he's all but certain to be replaced. Should that happen, if that happens, and administration officials are cautiously optimistic it'll happen within the coming week or so, if you get a new prime minister in Iraq, you already have a new president and a new speaker of the House following those elections. There is, they believe, a little bit more hope that this will be an inclusive Iraqi government. But look, Iraq's had horribly dysfunctional governments, certainly, ever since the fall of Saddam Hussein. So this is cautious optimism at best.
And complicated, to say the very least,
yes,
about that situation. ABC's chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, at the White House. John, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And of course, you can keep up with the story in real time by downloading the ABC News app. Star in the story for exclusive updates on the go. For now, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York.